Hey everybody, it's Professor Diffley. It's Philosophy 255, Chapter 9. This is Lecture Video 3. So we left off here. I said take a look at Exemplar 2.9. Now let's take a look at this a little bit more in detail, what we finished up in Lecture Video 2. Talking about the scarcity of resources and what do you do when you cannot help everyone. How do you decide whom to help? How do you make these decisions? That sort of thing. One of the examples given in the book, and one that can relate to real life, is who gets help, children or elderly, right? How do we determine, excuse me, how do we determine distribution of resources when there's not enough to go around for everybody? And this is where we're going to bring in John Rawls and his famous and influential views on what is justice. And so make sure, let me just make note, there's a couple of videos on John Rawls. He's also covered in the crash course video on what is justice. And then there's a couple of videos that give brief synopses of what Rawls argues. Make sure you take a look at those. It's mentioned in the book. The videos, I think, do a better job of diving into it, a bit more explaining it. So take a look at those. But John Rawls takes more of a deontological absolutist approach. What Rawls argues for justice is that justice is fairness, but we should be helping those most in need. So it's a little bit closer to equity, I would argue. So decisions, Rawls would argue, should be to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged members of society, right? And that's what equity is about, is that we want to help everybody, but some people may be more in need of help than others. So he would argue who are the least, the benefit of the least advantaged members of society here. And so that's the question. Absolute justice would be that everybody gets everything, right? Everybody's deserving, everybody is helped fully and equally. But again, that's not always possible. So what do you do in there? But under absolute justice, resources, even though scarce, should be distributed both groups equally. The issue then, though, is does that help everybody, right? If you have to spread your resources too thin, maybe not everybody is helped, and that's a consequence, right? Is that nobody is truly helped, where you could focus on one group and help them to a much greater extent. This would be the that would be one goal there. Again, is it fair? Are there measurable differences between the two groups? How do we account for those? Who should be helped? Is it better to help some fully and rather than everybody just a little bit? These are the kinds of questions that need to be asked for there. Need to be discussed, need to be gone over. And it's not always an easy choice there at all. But more on this. More utilitarian relativist is consider the outcome. What's better for the greater good of society? This is what I was talking about in previous videos. Where people would say, well, look at the person's position. What do they do for a living? What kind of health are they in already? Should you be using life-saving resources when they're in short supply to help people who are already very sick? Who may not. Yeah, you could save them, get them through whatever present crisis they have, but they may die soon thereafter for other reasons. Should those be resources, those life-saving resources, be funneled towards those who have the most life to give, yet to live, those who could help the most, that sort of thing. So which is the greater good for society? Again, the critique of the utilitarian approach is that this is very cold, right? We're going to say, we're going to help the young because they got more life to live, and it's just by, the lottery of now you're older, you're not going to get the help. If you're elderly, you're not going to get the assistance. They're going to let you die, that sort of thing. Neither is a great option, right? I mean, that's kind of the point in this. They're not perfect options. You kind of have to try to find the best or the least worst option is really the way to go. Unfortunately, these situations can play out in real life. They're difficult, to say the least. There's a lot to go into it. And it's not always clear what is the best. Most would argue, again, that children are the most deserving. Future society, they're still young. They can continue to contribute to society. But is that really fair towards the elders? Just because you're older doesn't mean you have nothing left to contribute, that your life isn't valuable, and you can still help society. So it's really it's going to come down to how you view this and what you think you should go. The third choice, obviously, is the absolute one, absolute justice. Everybody's deserving. So what we should be doing is ensuring that we have everything, that we can meet the needs of both groups equally, help everyone. Is it idealistic? Yeah, I mean, this is the right. That's what an ideal we want. This is the best. This is what we're striving for. The reality is that at the moment, we not necessarily we don't have the resources. Maybe they're just not distributed in a way that make them get to everybody, or maybe we don't have the resources. Really, that question depends on turns on whom you ask it of. To be honest, but this would be the goal. The third choice would be to help everybody. Can this be achieved? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends. Consider national needs and budgets, right? What is the country spending its money on? A often used refrain is we spend all this money on military where we could be using it, in wars where that money could be better served. The billions, if not trillions spent on wars around the world, the Middle East, that sort of thing. That money could be better used at home. But the other is when we have the budgets, is who does it go to, right? The money is there. Usually, funding choices when made by representatives, be they in D.C. By Congress or in your state capitals, that sort of thing, even in your cities. There are choices. People make policy choices, right, and decisions. The funding, it's who and what they choose to spend the funding on. And this is where that advocacy part comes in that we were talking about, we mentioned, and we're going to see in a few later slides. That's going to be your job as a social worker, helping professional, is arguing why money should be spent on a group that you believe is most deserving, that sort of thing. But the reality in the United States is which group do we spend more money on, the young or the elderly? Well, it is. You'll see on page 180 in your text. It's the elderly by far. It's many, many times more money is spent towards the elderly than the young. Why? There's a lot of factors that go into that. The idea that they contributed to society, they've paid into the system, and now is our turn to take care of them, that sort of thing, right? Others, a little bit more pessimistic, is why do you think the elderly get a greater share of spending and resources than the young? Some would argue is, well, the elderly vote and the very young do not, right? And so, unfortunately, some politicians do make these decisions based on that, is that they're going to, they need to get elected, right, or reelected. And so, they'll push for things that benefit their potential or their guaranteed voters, right, to secure those voters. So that's one view of it in the United States. Again, another view is, like I said, is that the elderly, it's our turn to take care of them, the elders, the elder generation, that sort of thing. But nonetheless, we do spend a ton more on the older population than we do on the younger population, for better or for worse. But that is really up for you to figure out how you think. And again, if you disagree with the way money is doled out, budgets are constructed, what priorities are, that's where, again, in your fields, that's where you become advocates, right? You lobby your representatives. You get the issue in the news, in the public consciousness, the public eye, and you push for it and you make arguments that way. That's really what we're talking about here. All right, now we're going to shift over to something else, discrimination, right? Because this is part of justice, right? We're not supposed to discriminate. So what is it? This is in the preamble of the code that our social workers sensitive to cultural and ethnic diversity and strive to end discrimination, oppression, poverty, and other forms of social injustice, right? Again, that's the ideal here. This is your principle. We talked about this of social justice. You saw that in other slides in the back. This also makes it into section 3.09, subsection E. You should act to prevent and eliminate discrimination in the employing organization's work assignments and its employment policies and practices, right? So essentially what that's saying, I mean, you can see here in the code, it wants you to deal with discrimination on lots of levels, right? National level, societal levels, your communities, and even in your workplaces. That discrimination is the antithesis of what you're doing in your professions, right? Section 4.02. Discrimination says social workers should not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate with any form of discrimination based on all of these things there. Right, that is the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing. So discrimination, obviously frowned upon by the code. You see it again in 6.04. Social work should act to prevent and eliminate domination of, exploitation of, and discrimination against any person or class on the basis of these categories here. So again, in short, what should you be doing as a social worker? Opposing discrimination and actively seeking to end it, to remedy the situation. Again, high ideals, but it is part of the job. It is, not only are you working with your clients individually, but you're also trying to help fix and alleviate all the issues that got them into the situation. If they were in need of assistance, if they were already a discriminated group, that sort of thing. Why oppose discrimination? Well, because it's wrong, right? It's unethical. It's most people, I think, would agree with this. The other thing is once you start discriminating against certain groups, it creates additional social problems, right? If you have a certain class of people or group of people who are poor, in poor health, lack health care, food, it creates all these other problems. One argument would be is if everybody had a better chance at life, better opportunities, you would need to be spending all this money later, right? So it's if you help them up front, you won't need to have a robust social welfare program. You won't need to use it as frequently, that sort of thing. But yeah, discrimination is wrong, is the argument here. So we're supposed to be pushing for diversity and respecting it and advocating for it. And this is from your text. These are the dimensions of diversity, the intersectionality of multiple factors. What do we mean by that? None of these are necessarily, you could look at them individually, but often intersectionality, what we're meaning here is that they often go together, right? You can be age, you could be of lower class, of a specific race, have a disability, right? They all go together. But these are the large ones, large categories, most would say. Discrimination falls again, right? Ageism, classism, color, race, culture, disability, ethnicity. Ethnicity, culture could go similar there. Gender identity, expression, immigration status, your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, your sex, or male, female, sexual orientation, that sort of thing. These are all things that we need to recognize as diversity. We often focus on race, color of skin, but diversity, there's lots of it. Socioeconomic, lots of factors that go into it. So what about diversity in the code? Well, we're supposed to value it. According to the code, one of the core values is dignity and worth of the person, right? We respect the inherent dignity and worth of individuals, regardless of their background. And that's what we want to focus on here, right? And that's what you should be striving. Everybody is worthy. Everybody deserves dignity. And it doesn't matter if they're different than you. This is America. It is a diverse place. You have to be comfortable with this. And also respect the differences, right? Not everybody's going to be like you. Doesn't necessarily make yours better than theirs. Your way of life. That's what we're talking about here. And this goes, your commitment to cultural diversity, right? Section 1.05. You should understand cultural and function and its function in human behavior, right? So you need to be familiar with different cultures, how they can influence people. And when it says recognize the strengths that exist in all cultures, again, is not having a bias, right? It might be different than your culture, but I think you'll find that there are a lot of similarities in certain areas, right? And you need to recognize that. You should have a knowledge base of your clients' cultures and demonstrate competence in understanding them. And so this is part of your need to have to continually learn, right? It's one reason why we have you take classes like world religion, things like that, to expose you to different ways of life and different things. But that's something you're going to have to do constantly throughout your work, right? You never know what group you can end up serving, right? They might be completely a group that you're very familiar with. It could be a group you're unfamiliar with. If you're unfamiliar with them, you should be learning about them. Same way there. And that's what we're really pushing you to do here is you have to have a commitment to this diversity. And that also means trying to learn about and understand and appreciate what you can of cultures different than yours. And so we'll actually pick up in lecture video 4 here with this slide here, 1.05.